She wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. A verse from tonight's Gospel and the Christmas story. Queen Victoria was one of the most beloved and one of the longest reigning monarchs in the history of Great Britain. She reigned for 64 years. And when she died in 1901, she had almost all the heads of state of Europe, all the kings related to her by blood, not just the King of England, but the Kaiser of Germany and the Tsar of Russia, and all kinds of houses of aristocracy in Europe. And in fact, she gave her name to an entire epoch, an entire age, the Victorian age. Now, when Victoria, particularly when she was young, she loved to go for the summer to the Scottish Highlands, to Balmoral Castle. That was her favorite place. And what she liked to do often is to go off on her own and just wander around the Highlands. I don't know if they let the Queen of England do that today because all kinds of security people there, but anyway, she used to do that. She would just wander around on her own. And one day when she was wandering around, as often happens in Scotland, it started to rain. Rain is funny in Scotland, I've never been. It actually goes sideways. I still have never figured out how it was when I was stationed over in the UK. But anyway, she got caught in a rainstorm. And she was next to an old cottage. So she went over to the cottage and she knocked on the door, and a woman opened up. Now, the woman didn't recognize who it was, and Victoria didn't say what her name was. All she said to the woman was, "Could you please lend me an umbrella and I'll return it tomorrow?" The woman thought for a little bit and thought, "Well, I've got two umbrellas, a new one and an old one. Maybe I can let you have the old one." So she closed the door, she went back into her cottage, and she picked up the old umbrella. She brought it out and she gave it to the Queen of England, not knowing who it was. And the Queen said, "Thank you," and she went off with the umbrella. But when she started to open it up, she realized she had a holy umbrella. There were holes all over the place. In fact, it was probably better not even to have the thing at all, because water was coming through the umbrella anyway. But anyway, the Queen made it back to Balmoral Castle, and the next day, she sent one of her royal officials to take the umbrella back. And so he rode his horse on over there. He was dressed in the garb that showed what he was in the royal household. And he knocked on the door again, and the woman answered, and the man just said to her, "Queen Victoria says thank you for lending her the umbrella." And he gave her the umbrella, and he left. Well, the woman closed the door, and a great sense of regret came over her. And she started muttering, "If only I had known who it was. If only I had known who it was. If only I had known." It's a lot like the gospel story, isn't it? That innkeeper, on that first Christmas night, turns away, not the Queen of England, but the Queen of Kings, who has in her womb the King of Kings. I wonder if the innkeeper lived long enough to know who it was he turned away that first Christmas night. And if he did, I'm sure he said the same thing that that old woman said. If only I had known who it was. If only I had known who it was. There's a very famous picture painting of Jesus done over a century ago by a man named William Holman Hunt. Sometimes it's used on Christmas cards, which is kind of unusual since it's a painting not of the baby Jesus and the crib in the stable and Mary and Joseph and all that kind of stuff, but it's actually a painting of a grown man, Jesus, and he's standing at a door knocking. There's some interesting things in the painting. Jesus is holding a lantern, which symbolizes, of course, that Jesus is the light of the world. Like we heard in Isaiah tonight, there'll be a great light will shine on the people. Around his head is a crown of thorns, symbolizing his passion and symbolizing the fact to remind us that Jesus said if we're to be his disciples, we need to take up our cross daily and follow him. The third interesting thing, and some of you know this, there's no door handle. There's no way to open the door from the outside. When the painting first was exhibited, some people came to Hunt and said, "You forgot something. There's no door handle. There's no doorknob." He said, "I didn't forget. I meant the door to stand as the door to the human heart." And Jesus knocks at that door, but he can't force himself in. He can only be let in if we open the door from inside, if we allow him to come into our hearts. And so when Hunt did this painting, he meant it to be a pictorial representation of that wonderful verse from the book of Revelation. Remember it? Chapter 3, verse 20, which says, "Listen, I stand at the door and knock. If any hear my voice and open the door, I will come into their house and eat with them, and they will eat with me." You see, Jesus knocks at the door of our hearts all the time. And sometimes people refuse to open up their hearts to him. Perhaps we have some people here even tonight, at one time or another during their lives, have refused to open their hearts to Jesus. But by the mere fact that you're here this evening means you have opened up that door of your hearts, and you have let him in. And you know that he brings light to your darkness. And you know that he helps you carry your cross daily. And so you brought your cross through Memphis, through Bartlett, to St. Anne's Church on Stage Road to celebrate his birth, his great birth, 2,000 years ago. And you're here around his table in which he's going to feed us. We come together. And you know what? I'd be willing to go out on a limb and say that there's no one here tonight, no one, including myself, who really understands how blessed we are to be here together on this Christmas Eve. That we're so blessed that God so loved the world that he sent his only Son into it. And that the Son so loved his Father, and you, and me, that he was willing to suffer and die and rise for our salvation. And if that is not enough, even though we came in that flesh as that great gift 2,000 years ago on that first Christmas, he comes to us every time we come to Mass because he feeds us at his table. And we sit here this evening around that table. A question we may ask ourselves this evening: what a wonderful gift that birth of Jesus 2,000 years ago, and his continually giving of himself through the Holy Eucharist, through Holy Communion, in the sacrifice of the Mass. What a wonderful gift he continues to give to us. What is our response going to be? What gift can we give in return? Let's give him the best gift we possibly can, and that's ourselves. Let's return ourselves back to God, back to him, to give him everything that we have in terms of our own person. How great a celebration, how great a gift, not just 2,000 years ago that we remember, but every time we come to Mass. Let us open our hearts to Jesus every time he knocks. Mary.